it's going to be cool. So again, tons of different archetypes in the top 8, and so half of our top 8 is unique, and we're going to punch a couple more tickets here in the next hour or so. And I'm super excited again to see how it fleshes out. So we're going to start off here. Raja Sulaiman going to lead us off against Robert Hayes, and Robert Hayes has a Mana Dork on turn 1.
Surprise, surprise. Yeah, this is the ideal start for the mono green deck. I want to go back to that where we talked about you mentioned there was a ton of diversity within the metagame. Really, really good to see, especially the first week after a banning. I think a lot of people were very scared of, potentially just the entire tournament being like, half mono green and half Lotus Field. Those decks were represented in full force. There definitely was quite a few players playing those, but as we move towards the top of the metagame, we get a nice little snapshot of it's a lot more diverse than maybe people would have anticipated.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I actually have no idea where the highest Lotus Field deck placed today. I can tell you it's probably not going to be in the top 32 though. Just at a quick glance. So a lot of people are scared about that deck, and we're like, something needs to get banned from this. But it just goes to show, like, you don't really know until you know, if that makes any sense.
Right, and an interesting card. Well, we see two of them now from Robert Hayes. Burning Tree Emissary, not a card that you
Wow.
typically see in Devotion decks, but the one thing that Burning Tree Emissary does is it allows you to have these really explosive starts. Burning Tree Emissary in combination with Nykthos is incredibly powerful that we've seen before because it is 2 Devotion. It's essentially free, right? Because it replaces itself, and then you can just use that 2 mana right into activating Nykthos, and we see a Cavalier of Thorns on turn 3, even after our Llanowar Elves or Elvish Mystic got removed by that Heartless Act.
Yeah, this has got to be one of the sickest starts we've seen so far today. Burning Tree into use the 2 floating to activate the Nykthos, like you mentioned, with 5 Devotion available, which just, casually puts a Cavalier of Thorns into play on the 3rd turn of the game.
Yeah, and again, like through that Heartless Act, still being able to have this, ridiculous explosive draw is really what Burning Tree Emissary offers this deck. It's a lot more high risk because there's going to be situations where, let's say you draw the Burning Tree Emissary, but you don't find the Nykthos. It doesn't do a ton for you at that point, but because your deck is so more powerful when you have Nykthos, I think it does make sense to play the Emissary.
Looks like a Void Rend, I believe, is the card there for Raja Sulaiman. This is probably one of my favorite new cards. I just like having flexible cards, and it's destroy target non-land permanent, and it can't be countered, and it's just for the full Esper. So kind of a big draw in order to play this deck, I would say, if you're looking to play it.
Yeah, and we see the Cavalier bite the dust. And one thing that I want to point out is Raja did that on the end of turn of Robert. So basically, Raja went end of turn, the Void Rend, and with the Cavalier trigger, we're going to put a permanent back on top. I would be very shocked if Raja didn't have a counter spell. That sequence of end of turn, kill your thing, untap, countered on the way back down is what Raja's looking here for. Well,
Oh
I guess
wow!
color me surprised. No counter spell.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, not great for Raja. And then, of course, that Lair of the Hydra, which we saw do a ton of work for Core Bank last game, hits the field for Robert Hayes. Pretty difficult for control decks to deal with, typically with like the sweeper style effects and things like that. And Raja's under the gun here.
Right, and that's the thing about Cavalier of Thorns is yes, a removal spell does remove it from the battlefield, but it replaces itself, and sometimes even replace itself with something even better. You see, Robert Hayes' graveyard is absolutely just chock full of good cards. I see a Storm the Festival, a Cavalier of Thorns. So if Raja does answer this Cavalier, Robert's just going to put another good card on top of his deck, and then be able to just cast that the following turn.
Yeah, again, one of the problems that these control decks typically have is creature lands, and they're really good against mono green without creature lands, and things that replace themselves. So you can like verdict a bunch of mana dorks and burning tree emissaries after you've taken a little bit and get to stabilize. But being able to replace yourself and then having a creature land backup, that is really tough for these control decks typically.
Yeah, there's the layer of the Hydra, and that is definitely, like a common sequence you could see here is Raja just cast Supreme Verdict. But, Supreme Verdict has a couple of issues. Again, the Cavalier trigger, and then also that layer of the Hydra, so it's not really a clean answer.
Yeah, it's pretty rough sledding. And again, Raja's gonna leave 4 mana open, and like there's an absorb in hand.
It's like we got a devotion count
8.
of 2, 4, 7, 8. Yeah.
Yeah, so 8 8 mana available. You can do basically whatever you want with this.
Oh god, Robert has the Storm Festival in his hand too, so we got a storm in hand and a storm in the graveyard.
Oh man.
That's whew, boy, that is a lot. And remember, Raja didn't have a counterspell last turn, so we basically had 3 looks at a counterspell off of 2 off the deluge, and then 1 for Raja's draw step. But yeah, it looks like no counterspell here. So this is when things go from bad to worse.
I'm pretty sure there's an absorb in Raj's hand. I'm just gonna let it go
You think
anyways.
so?
Man, this is
Okay,
I'm pretty
I didn't get a
sure,
good
man.
glimpse
I
of
could be
Raja's
wrong,
hand.
but
Okay, yeah. So if
absorb, the
Raja has
second
an
card there,
absorb,
yeah.
I wonder if so interesting how Raja's playing this game. So I guess maybe is that a verdict too? Maybe maybe he just wants Robert to commit a whole bunch of stuff to the battlefield and then can just kind of clean it
Yeah.
all away with the Supreme Verdict, or potentially he's saving specifically the absorb for Carr and the Great Creator. Well, I guess Storm could find Carr, and so that's kind of the problem, the risk in letting it resolve.
We're just gonna just gonna do it again. Why not?
Yeah, the mono green
Uh,
Storm deck.
yeah. So storm the festival for 6 mana. I mean, it is a crazy card. And then was it 10 mana to flash it back? And Robert has that easily covered.
Yeah, and then some, because I think Robert also has a Kiora in his hand too. So if we ever decide to, or
Yep.
if we ever get into a spot where we're running out of mana, we can just deploy the Kiora, untap the Nykthos, and get a very clean boost of mana there.
This deck does some powerful things.
So
Robert's got
for Robert, looks like we got 5, 10, 18, 22 power.
oh,
I think
is that
we're
it?
looking at 22 power. Yeah, that's it. Just 22.
Oh, wow. Well, Raja has 5 lands in play. So, I mean, that's pretty fair. That's pretty fair. And there comes that
And
cure you mentioned,
here's that
Devin.
Kiora, yeah. But it looks like Robert tapped a couple of lands, so I don't think he has any mana floating. So it looks like we're just gonna do a. Okay, that's the card we're fighting over. Very interesting.
Yeah, Kiora
Huh?
gets the observer. It's very strange to me. I mean, the thing
Yeah.
is, if you untap in Supreme Verdict here, like there's just a layer there to beat you down still, right?
Supreme Verdict, I'm not gonna lie, is really bad on this board because you get 2
Yeah, it's
Cavalier
horrible.
triggers, the Old Growth Trolls
Yeah,
attach themselves to
yeah,
lands, and you still have the layer of the Hydra. So, yeah, it's one of those
yeah.
spots where maybe Raja, it just didn't even really matter what he did. He just kind of had no outs at that point.
Yeah, it's just horrible. I was thinking like, oh, there's an absorb for this, but like, does it win you the game or like stop you from losing? I don't think so. And maybe it's one of those things where you like want to hold on and like, man, maybe he doesn't know that I'm playing absorb or these counter spells, but I don't know. They probably played side by side at some point today, you would assume, and have seen each other's deck lists. So, at any rate, Robert Hayes with a crazy start to the game, puts tons of power in play. The Burning Tree Emissary, and Nykthos is something I haven't seen in quite a while. So I'm having nightmares and like flashbacks again of that happening to me while I'm playing like some mopey like Dimir deck or something. I'm like, oh, great, your whole board is here. That's cool. That seems great. So, yeah, good dub there for Robert Hayes. I think it's important to get game number 1 as the mono green deck as well.
Yeah, and I think honestly that game was kind of decided by the Burning Tree emissaries. You see typically the way that Esper kind of can win that matchup is if the green deck doesn't kind of go under them, you can trade 1 for 1 with the early mana
Yeah,
acceleration. But the Burning Tree into Cavalier just put this immense amount of pressure on Raja, wasn't able to come back from it. And at that point, at the end of the game, even if Raja found a Supreme Verdict, it basically wouldn't have even done anything.
yeah, I'm with you. Again, we see like so we've seen this a lot today, like the people's like small differences in their deck choices, the choices within the same archetype, right? So Robert has decided to play these Burning Tree emissaries to accelerate to these starts like we just saw. And I think if you ask Robert, this is what his deck wants to do every single game. It's just exactly that. And really shined there. So we'll take a peek at the deck list here. Speaking of that, and give you a glimpse into what's going on. So taking a peek here at Raja's deck. And we've seen this earlier. I think his deck's actually it's decently built against this mono green deck. But I mean, not if it starts like that, though.
Right. So Raja does have access to a lot of the spot removal, so Fatal Push and Thoughtseize, along with I see looks like a Doomblade, Vanishing Verse. The nice thing about Vanishing Verse is we talked about the Cavalier of Thorns has a dies trigger, but Vanishing Verse exiles, so very very important against Cavalier. The looks like 3 copies of Absorb unless I'm missing one, couple Void Rends. So the removal spell, the removal suite is good. Now moving on to the sideboard. We see a really nice 4 of here for Raja, 4 copies of Aether Gust. That's probably the single best card that Raja is looking for. Definitely a slam dunk in this matchup. I'm not as familiar with the Esper control deck and how the matchup typically plays out post board, so I don't know if Raja's interested in these additional threats like Hermit or Graveyard Trespasser. Could be interesting though, if you maybe want to try to go under, but I doubt that's where Raja wants to be. But definitely 4 Gust.
Yeah, I would assume not. You got to cut like maybe a couple of these memory deluge. They're just really slow. You want to be able to stabilize early. So the Aether Gusts are obviously going to come in. These Dovin's vetoes probably not good. I mean, obviously they're quite good against Storm the Festival, but I just don't think it matters. You'd rather play like these Aether Gusts in that spot, better against more of the deck. Looks like they're going to shuffle up. Maybe we can get a quick peek at Robert Hayes' deck while he's still shuffling on it. Looks like he's taking a mulligan here.
If I had to guess, well, I guess I can pull it up. Here it is. I was going to say 13 card targets. Yep, there it is.
Yep. Yep. Again, so we see more of the same on those sideboard cards, kind of eaten up by that Karn, the Great Creator package. A couple of Voracious Hydras, and it's pretty streamlined, honestly. And he's just on tons of 4 ofs, and there's like a 1 of Pelucranos in there. There's obviously the 4 Burning Trees, but this deck looks pretty good. So
Yeah, and just to note, the cut that was made for those Burning Tree Emissaries was Wolfalo Haven. That's usually a stock 4 of, so that was the clean swap for Robert.
yeah, all right, cool. Some good insight on this deck, and Raja going to lead off on the Shocklands of Sylvan Caryatid.
And
Go
this is
ahead and
kind of the
see.
perfect start for Robert because, as we saw Raj's deck, he had a ton of spot removal, Fatal Push, Doomblade, all that kinds of stuff. So having access to Sylvan Caryatid instead of Llanowar Elves is really important for, just having mana acceleration that doesn't die the spot removal spells is really good for Robert.
Yeah, so Raja has 2 Dovin's vetoes in the main deck, which I just kind of missed. So I saw him draw when I was kind of wondering why we had him. We had went to him, but they're in the main deck. Those 2 cards are.
Yeah, I think Veto's pretty good. It answers some of the better threats like Nissa, Karn the Great Creator, Storm the Festival. So I think it's a card you don't mind having access to. You don't want to overload on it because it obviously doesn't answer Cavalier and Old Growth Troll. But it is nice to be able to, on those kind of big Storm the Festival turns, having a nice counterspell that answers, I think, those important cards is good.
Well, this is big, like you mentioned. Robert has a Kiora, and it's going to eat a veto here. I would assume. Yeah. So that eats a
Yeah,
veto. And
it's interesting because Raja knows about the second Kiora, so I'm wondering in
yeah,
that spot if Raja would rather save the veto for something, a potential top deck Storm the Festival or Karn the Great Creator, because you know about the second Kiora.
that makes sense. Roger's going to get to the point where this deck wants to get. It's a pretty weak board for Robert. Just a few mana dorks. The last 2 cards in hand. One's a land and one's another Kiora. And he's got looks like 4th land wrapped up. I think he has 5th land wrapped up, and it's a fairy. So about the best you can do here.
Love this Fatal Push
Go
from
ahead and move
Raja.
in.
You know the leftovers are land Kiora, so you want to prevent your opponent from being able to cast Storm the Festival if Robert were to draw it.
Yeah. Both and this is a nice one here. Going to go ahead and replace itself, hopefully for Robert. Looks like there's a Cavalier of Thorns in there. Quite good.
Yeah, I think that was a Cavalier. Unfortunately for Robert, again, because of that Fatal Push, now Robert can't deploy that Cavalier, so very, very heads up play from Raja. And we're going to go for the Kiora. It is nice to get the Kiora in play before we play the Cavalier, because if the Cavalier were to resolve, we get an extra card off of it. So, not the worst sequence for Robert, but
Raja's hand. I mean, there's a there's a it's a fairy, but like otherwise we're just like cycling this fetid. There's a Supreme Verdict. That's a good one. But we're just like cycling and not doing much of anything. Honestly, gonna
yeah,
need
I
a
mean,
lot of
Raja's
help from this.
definitely happy that he has Teferi. That's definitely the best card he could possibly hope for here. And hopefully for Raja, he can maybe find some more action off the Teferi. But like you said, Raja's kind of on empty at this point. Really looking for a card like I think Memory Deluge is probably one of Raja's best top decks at this point, if not the best.
Oh, oh gosh, I think that's a Storm the Festival that Robert just drew. Actually,
Oh boy,
I believe
fire
it was.
again. Yeah, you are
Oh man, it's
correct.
gonna
See if we have a counter
jam it right
spell.
into him and say, "You got
Oh,
it."
counter
Yeah.
spell. Oof. We'll see if we brick. I've missed on my fair share of yeah, this looks like a brick. Looks like a 2/2 in a land, not the best.
Yeah. So pretty lucky for Raja there. Shields were down, and the festival was stormed, but not particularly not a particularly good one there.
Yeah, storm kind of died down after a little bit, not the best here. Um But yeah, and that was kind of the decision point. Robert had the option of playing Cavalier there. I mean, obviously, I completely agree with Robert's play. He definitely jammed the Storm there, but just got a little unlucky. And the nice thing about not playing the Cavalier for Raja is now there isn't really much in the way of pressuring Teferi. Whereas if let's say Robert played the Cavalier, something to attack Teferi, that Raja would have had to answer. So definitely a good sequence
Yeah,
for Raja here.
Raja's actually in a really good spot here. Got that Shambling Vent hanging out to play some defense, Supreme Verdict, and a Deluge in hand. So Raja's going to be able to put the pedal to the metal here. Man, Thoughtseize huge rip too to get rid of that Cavalier before it draws Robert another card.
Yeah, and now Robert's basically on empty. Now, I believe. Okay, so we got what, 5, 6 mana, 7 with the Kiora. So not quite enough to flashback the storm. How about if we find a Nykthos? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think we would. Oh yeah, Nykthos would be enough because the Kiora, but picked up a
Yeah,
second layer, which is not too bad. Now we have 2 layers to at least try to apply some pressure on this Teferi. Looks like we're going to go to that
yeah.
layer.
I mean, you either got to protect with Shambling Vent here. Yeah, that's a pretty good turn,
Hmm.
honestly, for Robert, considering he drew a land there. It's not the worst he could have hoped for, but Raja's
I
firmly in
wonder
control here.
I wonder if Robert was supposed to hold back that Burning Tree Emissary. You give the option for of Raja to chump block with the Shambling Vent, but if Robert does pick up a Nykthos, he's really going to wish he kept that Burning Tree Emissary because the Nykthos would then allow him to flash back that Storm the Festival.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, here comes the big old Sky Noodle. It's gonna bring back that Omen of the Sea, and
Yeah, Flicker Teferi 2 to gain a little bit of a loyalty boost.
oh man, come
And
on. There's a
does have the
gust.
Gust.
Yeah,
All right. Robert's going to pack him up.
Robert
That
picks him
is
up.
game number
Wow.
2.
Wow. Yeah, a lot different than game number one there. I thought Robert was gonna be able to handle it there, and that Storm of the Festival not being good was a pretty big investment. Definitely hurt, and Raja I think he got fairly lucky on that Storm didn't find anything. But yeah, it's just kind of a clinic there. And the thing too is, like, what's weird about these games is Raja won that game without having to use like a verdict. I think he actually only used one fatal push, so not a lot of spot removal even being used. Just the Aether Gust was enough to break the camel's back. So it'd be interesting to see how Game 3 shakes out.
Right, and as we talked about, that crucial turning point of the game was the decision for Robert to cast Storm Festival over the Cavalier. Obviously, it was the correct line. Just a little unfortunate for Robert that he bricked there. Had he cast the Cavalier, maybe could have pressured the Teferi, or obviously if he hits maybe a Carr and a Cavalier off the Storm, the game's a lot different. But bricking on that Storm the Festival is the definitely the one turn that Raja needed to claw back into that game.
Yeah, and Robert's gonna be back on the play here, which is huge, especially with those 4 Burning Tree emissaries, able to just like either A, fill up the board, or B, have just a surplus of mana early in the game. And Raja's gonna have a hard time dealing with that without again one of those wrath style effects. And even by then, the damage might already be done. So we'll see how game number 3 shakes out. These guys played pretty fast. There's still about 30 minutes left in the round, and we played 2 games, mono green versus control. I am certainly happy about that.
Me too. But yeah, we'll have to see how, like you said, how Game 3 plays out. Definitely, the matchup is a lot different when the green devotion player is in the play. As you saw Game 1, we had the double burning tree into Cavalier, and Raja wasn't really able to just he wasn't able to get his feet in the door. And that's kind of exactly what Robert is looking for when he's in the play, just looking for Nykthos, burning tree emissary, and just wants to kind of develop a massive board before Raja can even answer the first threat.
All right, sounds good. Well, they're probably still shuffling up down there. I just want to say thanks to everybody for hanging out with us all weekend long. I know people hung out with Honorug yesterday a bunch, Drake. We're just having a blast today. Me and Devin are just gonna, do this round. We got the elimination rounds, the next 3 rounds up. 4 unique decks already into the top 8 for us. We're gonna winner this match is very likely into the top 8, as well as our backup match, which we'll get to in a little bit. So we're going to have all those rounds, the last round of Swiss here, and then those elimination rounds. So it's been a great day for Pioneer. I think good news for Magic fans is Pioneer doesn't seem too bad so far, right? I know it's the first weekend and we have about 200 or so players, but this one's going to help shape the meta. And nothing that I've seen, I don't know if you've seen anything that looks very oppressive or anything like that, that really needs to get shaken up. I think that it looks like it's in a pretty good spot. You can kind of play anything you want. There's combo decks, there's control decks, there's the big green devotion style decks. There's a little bit of there's like graveyard centric decks, a little bit for everybody. So it's great.
Yeah, exactly. And as we talked about earlier, there was 4 decks already into the top 8, 4 different archetypes. Format seems very, very wide open. I took a little bit of a snapshot, which I have over here, of kind of the top 8, or not the top 8, but the metagame of decks that people played today. We had Devotion at 12%, and then the next 5 were all 8%: Rakdos, Lotus, Mono Red, Is It Phoenix, Azorius Control, and then we had 6%, 5%. So there's really nothing that's terribly dominating in terms of even numbers, along with with win rate, because obviously there's so many different decks in the top 8. And potentially, I think the Devotion deck is maybe a little bit too powerful for the format in terms of Nykthos specifically. That card is incredibly powerful, but I'm cool that they kind of just let it. They're letting it slide for a little bit, see if the format can adapt to it, and I like that decision.
Sure. All right. Looks like there is some mana dorks in Robert's hand, and there's a Supreme Verdict in Raj's hand. Those are going to keep keeps most of the time, most of the time here. All right.
Yeah, we get an elf for Robert and no fatal push for Raja. So that is definitely the key choke point here. We'll see how Robert can kind of capitalize on. Well, okay. Didn't need the elf anyways. Only had an extra. Didn't use the mana. Got a free point though.
That's terrifying. I believe there's a Karn in hand as well as a Nykthos and a Cavalier. So Robert's hand is scary.
Yeah, this is kind of exactly what Robert's looking for. Just a bunch of mana, bunch of acceleration, and a couple of payoffs. Basically perfect. So we'll see exactly which threat he decides to lead off first. I like using all of them. Yeah, perfect. I like using all the mana here. Just be mana efficient. Also, if for some reason the Cavalier does resolve, you get a lot more devotion for that Nykthos next turn.
Yeah, there's definitely an Aether Gust in hand. Yeah, I mean you have to, right? You got to do
You have
this.
to. Yep. Have to fire
Otherwise,
it
just
off.
so far behind.
Yeah. Yeah.
They can pretty
Unsurprisingly,
big pick
Robert
up
does
with
put it
Thought
on
Freeze.
top.
Just gonna get rid of that Karn, I assume. Oh, there's just 2 of them.
Which
That's
one
nice.
though?
That's good.
Not the best for
So,
Raja here.
man,
Potentially, I don't know if he has another Thoughtseize. I think I saw, like you said, the Verdict. Maybe a couple lands.
yeah, there's a Vanishing Verse, an Omen of the Sea. I think a couple lands and a Verdict. So whatever Robert decides to play here is going to resolve, I believe. I'd be surprised.
Yeah, I
Obviously,
was
I'd be
gonna
surprised if
say.
they don't just run
Yep.
it back. Yeah,
Yep. Makes a lot of sense, especially because, you like I said, you want to just use your mana efficiently, and putting the Cavalier into play gives you a lot more devotion for Karn the following turn. Is that a miss? A rare miss off of
I like it.
Cavalier.
Wow. Okay. Cavalier misses, but not too bad for Robert. Just follows it up with a Nykthos.
Yeah, one thing I didn't get a good look of, and we see the glare at the top of Robert's graveyard. I wanted to see if he hit a Storm the Festival. That's big to see whether or not he hit that. It's hard to
I,
tell. I want to
I
say no, but
looks like Karn, Kiara, and a troll up there. I don't know what the other cards were though. Raja's got some tough choices here. Well, he knows about the Karn. That's the leftover card in Robert's hand. And there's a Thoughtseize in this Omen of the Sea pile. But, like, can you afford to take a turn off to do that?
Knowing about the card, you almost kind of have to. You can't really let, if you don't have a counterspell in your hand, you basically are forced to take this Thoughtseize. You can't let Robert have access to that, especially with the Nykthos, and he has access to so much mana.
Yeah, I think one of the problems here is Raja has a basic plains in hand. So if you use your black source here, it's going to be on Thoughtseize, and you can't Vanishing Verse either. So mana tied up in all kinds of weird ways here.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you can afford to take a hit off the Cavalier. It's not the end of the world. Let's say maybe a sequence of Thoughtseize the Karn, take a pretty sizable hit because you're going to get hit by the Cavalier and the Lair of the Hydra, and then follow up with the Vanishing Verse and the Cavalier next turn. The cool thing about Vanishing Versing the Cavalier is it does decrease Robert's access to Devotion, so means the Lair is going to hit for a lot less. I guess what
Raja
Raja's. Oh, okay,
bought them both. Yeah.
interesting. Okay, it's a good pickup for Robert, or for excuse me, for Raja here, the absorb, because now we can cleanly answer that Karn without having to cast the Thoughtseize.
It's just tough. So I don't think he has another land minus his plains actually. The Wrath.
Okay, Verdict's not a bad play here. Depends on what's in the graveyard. Like you said, it was hard to tell exactly what was in the graveyard for this Cavalier, but it does mean that access to much less devotion for Robert on the following turn here. So it might just have to be Karn pass or something along those lines. So definitely makes Robert's turn a little weaker.
Yeah, and I think actually Raja picked up a Void Rend as well. So gonna have a sort of clean answer to this Karn as well. All
All
right.
right, so we're gonna go for the troll for Robert here. Makes a little bit of sense because he does have the nick though, so the troll just is a pretty sticky threat. It's hard-ish to answer. Obviously, we know that Raja has the Vanishing Verse, but it is nice, from Robert's side, devotion plus sort of a sticky threat. Definitely like that for Robert. So we're gonna
Raja's in a
go with
really good
shocked
spot.
here.
Yeah, Raja's in a great spot here. Has this and then has a has an absorb for this Karn if it wants to go down.
Yep. Yep, absorb for the Karn, and then Robert's leftovers are really not that much. I mean, he's got the two copies of Lair, but oh, interesting. Okay.
I like I like that a lot.
Yeah, Raja did shock and pass, so he's kind of playing with the absorb face up. So definitely heads up play from Robert.
All right. Just fire it back up. You attack again, you think?
Yeah, again, it's kind of the same spot. Okay, he's going to go for the troll. That's not bad because you'd much rather resolve the Karn. This is actually pretty good bait. Raja kind of wants to use his mana. He feels like he doesn't want to keep holding up 3 mana the entire game, or maybe not that specifically, but Raja did play with essentially the absorb face up. He told Robert that he had it by shocking last turn. So getting to use your mana here is nice.
All right. This game's gotten really tough for Robert all of a sudden, it looks like.
Yeah, I think
So
Robert's just on Karn, and I don't think I got a good glimpse of the last card, but Karn and
yeah.
not much else, and Raja's running away with this one, I think.
Yeah, double Void Rend for Raja here. And I think there's a Fatal Push in hand too. Double Rend, Fatal Push. What are we going to get if we're Robert? So as we look through that sideboard, there's there's not a lot of great things in here. I mean, maybe the Great Henge. Is that good enough?
I'm gonna pull up Robert's deck list here. One card that I would usually get in this spot is Ezeka's Chariot, but it does not look like Robert is playing that one. This is one
No.
of the spots where I really would like Chariot here as just a threat that makes a couple of bodies and can potentially raise the Yorion. But Robert not having access to that Chariot here means that he's very limited. He ends up getting a Treasure Vault, which signifies to me that that last card is probably a Cavalier once access to that 5th mana.
Okay. All right. Down goes Karn. And once again, Raja just has Fatal Push and double Void Rend. Like Nykthos and a Forest are the cards. Oh wow.
All right. We're going upstairs.
Yeah. I mean, well, here comes that Fatal Push, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Fatal Push in the lair. Robert, Constellation Prize does have a second lair, but losing a land in the process, a bit rough for Robert here. Just
Wow.
kill it all. I like it.
That's
Just get it out of here.
I like it too. It's super aggressive, but I like it.
Got to get the classic no permanence victory. Although
Yeah,
I
I
guess
mean,
it's
what else
pretty
you
hard when there's 5 lands in play. So
I mean, if you're playing Esper control, you can't let your opponent just have creatures. That what kind of nonsense is that? Yeah, fire up the Shambling Vent. See, I like this. And then
get
Raja
him in
turning the
there.
corner rather quickly. Yeah. And that's gonna send 6 points in. And another Shambling Vent hits the field. Robert's in big trouble.
Oh, the Nissa. Okay,
Now
what are we looking for here, though?
oof, not a Burning Tree Emissary.
Yeah, 2 lands and a burning tree. That's probably not going to cut it.
Well, I mean, you can take another land. I mean, I guess if you're trying to like get this treasure vault rolling, I don't know what's going on. The layer of the Hydra, you can suit up a little bit, but
Yeah, we can potentially fire up the layer. Looks like we're going to hold it back to block the Shambling Vent
okay.
to sort of decrease the clock. I believe Robert should be, I think, at 14. I think it's the first damage that Robert had taken last turn, if I recall
I,
correctly. I think.
yeah, I think Robert. Yeah, yeah. I believe Robert took six last turn.
Yeah. So 14 is uh, holding back the layer of the Hydra means that if Robert, let's say if we can blank the Shambling Vent, that means we take 4 from the Yora and go to 10, and then it's still a 3-turn clock versus taking 6 this turn, going to 8, and then it being a 2-turn clock off the Yora. So holding back the Shambling Vent does sort of change the clock a little bit.
Okay. We're working on getting those life totals adjusted for you real quick. Our apologies here.
But yeah,
Maybe.
I hate to call it early, but I don't really see a way out of this for Robert. It's the thing is it definitely all starts with Storm the Festival. That's Robert's single best draw in his entire deck for sure. And if Raja maybe doesn't have access to a counterspell, potentially if it resolves, you could find, let's say, maybe a Cavalier and I don't know, a Nissa or something along those lines. Cavalier can block the Yorion, Nissa can help pressure the Teferi. So it all
Yeah.
starts with Storm the Festival.
Yeah. Yeah. Robert's in rough shape if it isn't Storm the Festival, excuse me. And all right. Yeah, Raja's in
Cycle
super good spot.
Cycle from Raja, I believe he only had 2 lands left over, if I recall correctly. I think if I got a glimpse at Raja's hands, so potentially, there's a little bit of hope for Robert here. Again, it's going to have to be Storm the Festival. I don't really think anything else is going to do it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I suppose. Well, Robert's trying to do something with Nykthos and to activate Lair of the Hydra, I believe, is what's going on here.
Yeah, so we
And
went 2
for
colorless.
4,
Now we're going to activate for 4. So this is going to be a pump for. I'm going to get a 3/3. Good sequencing.
yeah, I mean, the best
3
you
to
can
get
do there.
past the Shambling Vent. All right, yeah, yep. Sorry, the Shambling Vent was tapped. My apologies because we cycled the Raffine's
Oh,
tower.
well, that one's going to do it, I think. That is a Wandering Emperor and there's still a Void Rend in hand.
Oh,
I
still
think
got a
we're
Void Rend
probably
too.
done
Yeah,
here. Yeah.
yeah. Void Rend plus Emperor. That should be that should be more than enough to seal it up.
Really great
Although,
games played by both players. I mean, it was a really it's a pretty good one to watch, and Raja's deck able to turn the corner a little bit quickly here.
Right, and you remember how we kind of talked about this a little bit before is the game that Robert won was the game where he just kind of went under Raja, right? He had the
Yeah,
double burning tree emissary into that fast cavalier. When you give Raja a little bit more time to trade one for one, and you're not putting this massive amount of pressure on Raja, Raja's deck is going to very easily take over in the mid to late game.
this is some good sequencing here from Raj. I think he's going to go ahead and activate that Shambling Vent. You can assign blocks, and then you can rend also
We got
with that
two
mana.
shambling vents.
Yeah. Oh, Sage on one of them. Okay.
I wonder if this is before or
That's
after blocks.
this looks like before.
Okay.
It's quite good.
Yeah, I guess you have to do it before because otherwise Raja can just double chump block.
Yeah. So Roger's gonna be able to chump block one and still has mana for the rend if he chooses.
Yeah, remember Raja does still have that Void Rend, so we can just go say block the layer of the Hydra, Void Rend the Old Growth Troll, let Teferi still stays in play.
Yeah, that's brutal for Robert.
Oh, Robert's also only at 6. That is a very good point. So if we just keep the Shambling, then we can just let Teferi die, right? Yeah, we just let Teferi die and then attack for 6.
Oh, yeah, I think that's probably probably a better line. But it is late, and these players have played tons and tons of Magic this weekend.
Yeah, we got the Emperor
Also,
too. Yeah.
that one's fine too. There's tons of different ways to cut a pizza. I've heard there's like Detroit style, which is not far away. I've I never had Detroit style pizza. Someone have to explain it to me, but I'm actually like a New York style guy myself. But at any rate, Roger Sulaiman takes that down. Another archetype advances to the top 8. So that's 5 archetypes that we know of that are all unique to our top 8, which is pretty amazing here to start week 1 of New Pioneer.
Yeah, that's kind of been the story of the whole tournament. There, from since round one, there's just been a ton of different variety, a ton of different variety within the archetypes, and it's really, really nice to see now that especially after the bans, that like we talked about earlier, there's been a lot of people who were suggesting that Lotus Field and Devotion might be kind of dominating the events and just winning a little bit too much. They were the two most represented decks, but as Matt was talking about earlier, there's no Lotus Field anywhere to be seen in the top 32, and I believe so far only one Devotion deck in the top 8. So
Yeah, you're right. So far, yeah, I haven't seen any of the Lotus Field decks anywhere. I mean, again, I could be wrong. Just a quick glance through, but I didn't see any in like the top 30 decks. So we'll see how that shakes out. It sounds like we should have a backup match. Does that sound right? We do. Okay, so we're gonna get a backup match rolling for y'all right now. We'll see who else is gonna make it to the top 8. I believe there's a Rakdos combo deck, so one of those cat oven style decks here against a Boros aggro, if I'm remembering correctly as well. And we
yep.
saw this Boros aggro. You and I have seen it a couple times today. Kind of like wins the game out of nowhere somehow each time. I'm like, yeah, there's no way they come back, and they play this favorite hoplite, and it just kills you out of nowhere. And I'm like, I don't even know how that's possible. So we're gonna jump down there and get game number 1 rolling, and we'll see who gets into the top 8. Should be a good matchup. I'm interested to see how Mayhem Devil and all that deals with like these Boros aggro creatures.
Yeah, this is definitely going to come down to, I think, the protection spells like God's Willing, and also I think one of Zach's most important cards, not only God's Willing, but also Ancestral Anger. So the Rakdos deck is really good at putting a bunch of small creatures into play. I think 1/1 tokens from Anvil. We have Cauldron Familiar, which is also a 1/1, which is obviously really good at blocking bigger creatures. And Zach is trying to go tall with one of his big creatures. But when you take a card like Ancestral Anger or God's Willing into the mix, that's how you kind of get over those, wall of small blockers, as it were.
Sure. All right. So we're gonna see again my new favorite card. The favorite hoplite is coming into
Are
play.
you sure it's your favorite card? I thought there was some favorite hoplite slander early on today.
I don't know. I don't know if slander is the word I'd choose, but you know what? You're on stream. You're commenting. You can pick whatever word you want. They have to listen to you. So, favorite hoplite. We're not allowed to say bad things about it. Apparently, that's what Drake told me.
Okay.
So, favorite hoplite doing stuff, and against a Mayhem Devil now. And this is what I wanted to see though. How do we stack up against Mayhem Devil?
Well, Mayhem Devil, it's interesting, right? It kind of depends on how many times that we can. I think we actually have them flip flopped, but I think it really depends on how many times we can trigger that devil in the same turn. Because these creatures not only have two toughness already, most both Swift Spear and Hoplite both are 1/2s, but once you mix a card in like any one of the various combat tricks, the creatures keep getting bigger, so we can kind of outsize the Mayhem Devil triggers, especially if we only have one or two of them on the stack. So
All right, Devin. So I'm going to introduce you to something that happens here sometimes on the NRG series. So, and I know it's going to get asked a million times in the chat, so I'll probably answer this question about 7 or 8 more times over the next 20 minutes. The names are on the opposite sides, and the archetypes on the opposite sides. So this is a pre-recorded match. This is a time-shifted match, so we don't have the ability to switch the names on there. The life totals are correct, and we'll get you the right winner eventually. You're just gonna have to deal. Just put a piece of tape over your monitor or whatever it is to cover up the names. I don't care what you do. Just don't ask 100 times in Twitch chat. That's all. So this happens every so often. So
yeah, and like you said, because
uh,
it's pre-recorded, so we can't really nothing much we can't really go back at this point.
that's right. And that was an unlucky witness. Was the card that was on the battlefield there for people that were asking?
And here is an Ob Nixilis the Adversary, which is another new
Yeah.
card here. Lots and lots of new cards from Streets of New Capenna. This one is especially nice in this deck. There are so many ways and extra bodies. There's Unlucky Witness, there's Cauldron Familiar, all these like random bodies that you can kind of casualty, and making two Planeswalkers is pretty powerful.
Yeah, this card, people, you know how it is. People are asking for this card to be banned like the first day it was legal in the format, in the standard format. So I'm like, I was interested to see if it would make its way into Pioneer, and it sure has.
Yeah, I think this is probably the deck that we've seen it the most in. There's been some other potential decks that have been playing it, but this is where you kind of get to use the entire part of the buffalo, as it were, where
Sure.
just you have so many things to sacrifice to it. You can really just get a really good amount of value, and we'll have to see what Zach has here. See if we want to go after the Obnix list. It really depends on, as we talked about, potentially if Zach has maybe something to give your creature trample or protection. Do we even want to go after these Obnix lists? So we'll see how Zach sequences this.
Well, Reckless Rage, that's a good start here.
Yeah, Mayhem Devil is probably the one of the scariest cards, just because it is just the largest creature, and it's the one that provides the most amount of value for Jeffrey. So definitely a good use of that Reckless Rage there.
All right, we have my first contestant on the names or deck is reverse hotline. We're going to keep a tally, everybody. If it gets over 10, the owner of NRG has to buy me pizza tonight. So we are at 1 right now.
Was it the
So,
Detroit pizza?
yeah, whatever it is, it can be that. We'll see what Detroit pizza is all about. So, all right, some of these alt
Yeah,
arts, I can't tell what's that one in.
there's a lot of
You
them.
know, is that Claim the Firstborn? I feel like that's Claim the Firstborn in Jeffrey's hand on the left side there.
Potentially
That's
is
I,
claim is in Jeffrey's deck list. So
all right. Well, I knew I was going to be tested on alternate arts as well. So one vote for Norman buying dinner. Joe, good to see you. I hope you're feeling better, my friend. We definitely miss you this weekend.
Joe gets the final word.
Yeah. All right. So check it out. This Boros deck is just doing the same thing it's done every time I've seen it today. It's just suiting up this favorite hoplite, and it's asking their opponent to kill this 1/1, and they just can't. It never goes away.
Not a lot of people can, especially when you combine it with all the variety of different protection spells that Zach has access to, like God's Willing, and even outside of just God's Willing, the fact that if you target Hoplite with anything, you can't deal damage to it. So if you're, let's say, targeting it with a 3 damage spell, and let's say I Defy and strike my favorite Hoplite, even though it has 3 toughness, it still doesn't take damage. So it's really hard to kill that thing.
Oh wow! And now there's a Dreadhorde Arcanist on the field as well, and that one is a fatal push.
I know that one. Yeah, that's push.
Yeah, that one's good. I'm pretty sure that's claim. If that's claim, that is quite good. with this Dreadhorde Arcanist. All right, I'm up to 2 on names and decks reverse. I may actually make a command.
At this point, it
All right.
probably makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Dreadhorde Arcanist, that is the new old border, if you will. It's a good looking card though in person. That is Claim the Firstborn. I am doing really well on
There it
alternate art
is.
cards this weekend. Yeah.
But yeah, this is a really, really big swing for Jeffrey here. Zach did tap out, and that was the opportunity. As you mentioned, you kept talking about how it's really hard to kill fatal or favorite hoplite. Well, if your opponent is tapped out, it's a lot easier to when when
Sure.
essentially the shields are down.
Yeah. All right. And here we go.
See what we're looking now. Looking at Zach's deck list, I'm trying to think of what would be probably our best draw here. I mean, it kind of starts. Swift Spear is decent, but it's not one of those things like a favorite hoplite or an illuminator virtuoso that keep growing and growing and growing. It just kind of there's sort of a cap on how big a Swift Spear can get. So you kind of want one of the other creatures that can continuously grow over the course of the next couple turns. So something like a virtuoso, and then probably following that up, chaining a couple of cantrips. I remember there was one game we saw with this deck play where it just, there was player had not much in play and they just drew back to back ancestral angers, and all of a sudden they went from nothing to, oh, you're dead, just dead.
Yeah. I was thinking like I feel like the Defiant Strike is where we start like a lot of these mid game turns. It's like start with Defiant Strike, we draw into something else, and that's kind of how we get the ball rolling.
Yeah, and looks like we're going after the life total and not the Ob Nixilis, which is
Okay.
interesting because the Ob Nixilis, as long as you have a devil, does gain life. So it's
Yes.
really hard to race that if the devil remains in play.
Looks like I think that's the velocity. I think that's maximized velocity in hand there, which is
Okay,
obviously
that
not
is
enough, but
definitely a good
decent
one,
starting
especially
point.
if Zach can find something like a virtuoso, right? You could see something like virtuoso, potentially velocity it, connive into maybe a way to give it trample or protection, and then again one of those things where you could have nothing in play and all of a sudden you're just dead.
That
Ooh,
is
invigorated
wow.
rampage.
Red Rampage? Yeah.
That's not too bad. So I assume we're going to give the Swiss Spear +4/+0, or actually no, because Zach hasn't cast another spell. So if we want to kill the Giganta, we have to +4 the Swiss Spear, which I think is what happened. Yeah, I'm going to guess that's what happened.
Okay. +4/+0 and trample. So that
Yep.
deals 1 damage, right? Is that right? Should deal 1 damage over the top. Jeffrey's down. Yeah.
4, 5, 6. Yeah, it should deal 1 damage to Jeffrey.
All right. Well, that hive is
Yeah, I was gonna say sort of a close game, but we still have the Hive, we still have the Ob Nixilis going after Zach's hand and life totals. So, oh yeah, there's the Croxa too. I had forgot about that one. So Croxa's gonna end this game pretty quickly.
all right.
That I believe is I think Voldarin Epicure, the one that deals a
Yep.
damage and makes a blood. Yeah, okay, that's gonna
Blood,
do
yeah.
it.
All right. So we're gonna move on to game number 2. And the Rakdos combo deck, it has enough small things. I think I played a version like of this deck. It might have been Jund at the time, but it was in historic and had like Claim the Firstborn, and it felt miserable to play small creatures into Claim the Firstborn, and because they just take them and they'll sacrifice them to your oven, and you're just like, oh, this is just ridiculous. Claim the Firstborn is a busted Magic card. That's all I gotta say about that. And that's kind of like what this matchup looked like a little bit so far. Might change in game 2 or 3 with some more protection spells coming in. But I do know that playing like small creatures, especially one that you suit up really, really big, 1 or 2 creatures, if one gets claimed and eaten by an oven, you feel really far behind and really bad.
Right, and especially that's not even counting Mayhem Devil in the mix, where potentially you could see sacrifice your creature, maybe deal another point or two to one of your other creatures, and it really just gets out of control with Claim plus Witch's Oven. And the nice thing about that for Jeffrey is that remember a lot of Zach's creatures can get out of range of, as we talked about, those Mayhem Devil triggers. So if that does happen, something like Claim plus Witch's Oven is a way to kill a creature regardless of size. So that stuff is very important for Jeffrey.
Sure. All right. Sounds like we're going to be able to get to game number 2 here in just a second. So, yeah, we can check out Decklist real quick. Why not? Let's use some tech.
Sure.
So, Zach's list we've seen earlier, and I mean, the red cap melee is probably pretty good against things like Mayhem Devil, but there's the Unlucky Witness, there's the Epicures, tons of things that it hits. I just don't know how many of that effect you really want in your deck.
Yeah, from Zach's side of things, I think I like the Vanguard because it is a creature that is really hard to kill. As we talked about, it's kind of awkward against Mayhem Devil, though. How many times can you really afford to pay for a life for that thing? But yeah, we're looking at maybe Red Cap melee potentially to kill Mayhem Devil. Unlicensed Hearst, I don't hate it because it's good against Croxa and Cauldron Familiar, and potentially some number of Portable Hull Braid to kill those Witches Ovens.
Okay. Yeah. How about Unlicensed Hearst? That one's probably pretty good, right? It's got to be. It's got to be good in this matchup, right?
Yeah, I like Hearse a lot because again, as it does hit Croxa and Cauldron Familiar. I think there's probably some other stuff that it's good against, but yeah, I think the Hearses are pretty good in this matchup.
Okay. All right. Very good. So we'll move on to Jeffrey's deck here. Jeffrey Carr playing that Rakdos combo deck, and you know, there's a, I mean, it's not a ton that's great. There's another claim in there. Duress and Fatal Push are probably worth playing. Again, though, getting to get up to the 4th claim, and I didn't even realize there's these 2 village rights as well. I mean, there's tons of ways to just sack the little creatures, and that really hurts in this matchup.
Yeah, one card I actually kind of like a lot from Jeffrey's side is Thoughtseize. So the reason I like Thoughtseize so much is I think the most important cards from Zach's side of things are those protection spells. So you can imagine a situation where if Zach plays a creature and holds up a mana and you Thoughtseize him, he either has the opportunity, if he only has one protection spell, you either cast it in response, in which case then you just respond with your push, or Thoughtseize lets the protection spell gets taken and then you just get to slam the push. So I think Thoughtseize is a good way to break up the heroic deck from here.
Sure. All right, well, let's jump into game number 2 here, and see if anybody's going to pick up a dub. If Jeffrey Carr is going to be able to get a win here. And again, I understand that the names and things are backwards, but I will help guide us along the way. Jeffrey Carr is up a game over Zach and that Boros aggro deck. So,
What's the count at, by the way? I think we were at what, 3 the last time?
oh, yeah, we're at 3. He just Norm gets in the headset and says he just owes me pizza. So that sounds great, guys. Somebody tell me a good pizza place in Lansing, Michigan, please, whenever you're ready. All right. So
A lot of action going
stop.
on
Gonna
here.
go
We
ahead.
see, favorite
Yeah.
hoplite gets fatal pushed, and looks like there was a stomp that's going to take out something as well. So a lot of stuff going on, and that was the stomp from Zach. Okay, so Zach did bring in the Bone Crusher Giant. Kind of like that. The matchup is Jeffrey does have a lot access to a lot of 1-for-1, so having that 2-for-1 in Bone Crusher Giant is pretty nice for Zach here.
Yeah, and honestly, Jeffrey's deck. He is really cooperating right now. There's an oven and there's a Mayhem Devil on the battlefield. There's an oven and a Claim the Firstborn all in hand too. So looking really good for Jeffrey Carr here. There's a
That
Reckless
is
Rage.
Reckless Rage. That was, again, as we talked about last game, that is probably the best target for Reckless Rage because a lot of Jeffrey's other creatures kind of either replace themselves or come back, like Voltaren Epicure, Unlucky Witness, and Cauldron Familiar. So that's definitely the best target for Reckless Rage in Jeffrey's deck.
And you can see that was actually a deadly dispute there. So Claim the Firstborn. Yeah, I'll take your creature and then I will
Ooh.
actually I'll deadly dispute it as well.
Oh boy, and yeah, it looks like
Yeah,
Zach.
backed
Yeah,
up.
Zach stuck on 2 lands. Kind of rough here. He's got a lot of stuff in hand, but question is, does he have the time to, or can we actually deploy it? We're gonna go with an Arcanist here. With looks like we have Reckless Rage along with Defiant Strike in the graveyard. So some good stuff for the Arcanist if we do get to serve. Well, never mind.
Gosh, there's another claim.
Oh, I'm sacrificing it to Obnixilis. Oh my goodness. Oh
Yeah,
boy.
actually brutal.
Yeah, this is
Yep, I'm gonna go ahead
this
and
is a beating.
sacrifice that. Yep.
Probably gonna
So
go
take your
down on one and then up on the other. Yeah, makes sense.
yeah. And this game does not look particularly close. Again, I mentioned the claim to firstborns are just really rough for these small creatures, and two claim to firstborns already have happened, and Zach looks like he's in big trouble.
Yeah, that combination of claim the firstborn plus sacrifice outlet is so brutal because the thing is every time there most of the time with these sacrifice outlets there you're getting something else out of it, right? With Witch's Oven you're getting a food and then with
Yeah,
Obnixilus you're getting an additional planeswalker, so it's so much more than just a straight up one for one because you're getting the all of that additional text from whatever card you're sacrificing it to.
all right, so Bone Crusher Giant comes off an adventure and staring it down.
Yeah, we're gonna go upstairs with these Obnixiluses, and having the Devil in play means that every time we activate these Obnixiluses, we're gaining a bunch of life as well as dealing Zack some damage if he doesn't want to discard cards. And then Croaks is kind of that's the nice thing about this deck is it has a lot of good kind of ways to one for one, and then Croaks is kind of the way to shut the door, as it were.
Yeah, Zach discarding a portable holder. He has to have another one. Is that means, right?
More than likely, yeah. I didn't quite get a good. I see a white card. I'm gonna guess. Yep, portable hole. Good call.
There's the hold. Gonna get sacked
Ooh,
to the
yep.
oven. Gosh, it feels so bad to play against this deck. I'm having nightmares again of that. Like, it's just so hard because your removal's bad, your small creatures are bad. So, like, what do you really, what do you really do?
Yeah, it's a lot. Like you said, a lot of it's pretty bad. Karn the Great Creator is probably, as we saw earlier, that's probably one of the best cards against this Rakdos deck. But not every deck can support Karn, so
Man,
and even
tough
Graveyard Hate, it
one.
only goes so far. You have all these creature lands,
Yeah,
you have Obnixilus, you have Mayhem Devil. Like, yes, Graveyard Hate is good against some of the deck, like Kroxa, but I think there's too much to justify bringing in like heavy Graveyard Hate like that.
yeah, it's really tough. Gigant in a hand, and that's your whole turn. That is rough beats.
Yeah, and then we also have these Obnixilus ticking up, which is just dealing us more and more and more damage.
Yep.
God, Witness to sacrifice to the oven, which gives us more stuff for the Kroxa. Also, two cards off the Witness. What's that? Claim.
Claim the
Now, correct me if
firstborn.
I'm.
That one's good.
Is claim two or less or three? It's three or less. Oh
It is
boy, so I
great.
get to take that
Yeah,
Bone Crusher.
yeah, it is. Yeah, it is quite good. It gets to not only does it get to attack you for 4, you get to sacrifice it for a couple food as well if you need them.
Yeah, that's definitely rough. Zach did have the threatened play with the Bone Crusher Giant. We're going to be able to easily take that, and that I believe should get us, if we're not already there, that should get us pretty close to the escaping of Kroxa as well, which is
Yeah,
definitely going to put a wrap on this game. Unless
this
do we
is
just have lethal here with all these Obnixiluses potentially?
it. It looks like it. Jeff's moving pretty fast, so it looks like he's like already done the math in their head.
Casting something looks like looks like we're casting the other Obnixilus. Oh, now we have three Obnixiluses in play. Okay. Seems reasonable.
Totally fine. Back to back. The
And
names are backwards. We're doing good here.
we got a Fatal Push and the Bone Crusher Giant.
Yeah.
Guess maybe, yeah, okay, that's going to
That'll
be
do
enough.
it.
I was going to say maybe you could play a Giganta, but that is going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a really tough matchup with the way that Jeffrey's deck is configured with the 4 claim the firstborns post board. That's really tough for these like red white heroic style decks to fight through. Just being able to take all your creatures and eat them with oven or sacrifice them in some sort of way to gain card advantage back, things like that. Super difficult.
Right, and the thing is the removal spells just the on top of that, like the fatal pushes and things of that nature, just make it to where Zach is kind of pressured to use his protection spells early to get around the fatal pushes, and then to claim the firstborn into all of these various elements of sacrifice elements. Kind of once you clear that protection spell out of the way, then claim the firstborn is going to resolve.
Yeah, it's very tough. We've watched some matchups where like the removal spells are like 2 mana, which is fine. That's you trade your 1 mana creature for the 2 mana removal spell. That's technically you're ahead there. When their removal spells are 1 mana and they also get to attack you, that's miserable. That feels really bad. So tough end to the day for Zach, but a great showing, obviously. You know, decks seem really good, powerful, stole a lot of games away from people just going all in on creatures. And favorite hoplite, did a lot better than I thought it was going to do. And I think that deck definitely has legs. It'll keep getting iterated on. And once the metagame settles, they'll have better answers, more protection that fits with the style of deck. And I think it can only get better. So
Yeah, and another thing to point out that is yet another different archetype in the top eight. So we'll have to take a look at the final standings here, but we're at least, I think, what are we now at 6 different archetypes in the top eight so far. So
yeah,
really, really, really good showing so far. Really awesome tournament, and definitely glad to see all this diversity, especially with the new bannings as well.